The Department of Justice is a shell of what it used to be. Thousands of people have been fired or left on their own, most of them fired at this point. It's being run first by a MAGA loyalist to the president, and now by the president's former attorney who is still auditioning to be the attorney general and is doing pretty much everything in his power to show the president that he'll do whatever he wants. The FBI is being led by somebody who was allegedly drunk on the job frequently, so much so that they had to send a SWAT team to his apartment to wake him up at one point. And on top of that, investigations are falling through the cracks. We are getting perversions of justice. Trust is being lost from judges and the public towards an institution that is supposed to uphold fair and balanced treatment under the law, as much as that can be true in the U.S., and really is supposed to be keeping us safe. It's why my guest today is Stacey Young. She runs Justice Connection, a organization for Department of Justice employees who have left or who are thinking about leaving the DOJ, especially right now, to help them find the next step. She spent years working in the DOJ, and the last time we talked about the erosion that was happening, about what was happening to departments like the Civil Rights Department or the Election Security Department within the DOJ. But now we are talking about these bigger picture things. What does it mean to have a country that cannot trust its own Department of Justice anymore? What does it mean to have an acting attorney general who does whatever the president wants, up into and including corruption and potentially illegal deals? What does it mean to have an FBI and an FBI director who is the face of that organization and really the Department of Justice writ large, the thing that we think of mostly when we think of the Department of Justice, be a guy like Kash Patel? Stacey and I talk about all of that and what we can do to support the tens of thousands of people who are just trying to do the work of justice in America. It's Friday, May 22nd, 2026. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Grant Hermes. Stacey, thank you so much for being here again. I really appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's start with the thing that everybody is talking about this week, the anti-weaponization fund, the Slush fund for the president's supporters. Not himself directly, though. He's going to make out with at least $100 million in fines he's not going to have to pay here. When this dropped, what did you think and feel here?
It felt like it was perhaps the most corrupt act a U.S. government official has ever committed. $1.8 billion is an extraordinary amount of money that is coming from the taxpayers' pockets, going directly to Trump allies, presumably many of whom will have participated in the attack on the Capitol. So it's a horrific act of corruption. It seems to be blatantly unconstitutional, and it's coming out of a frivolous and absurd lawsuit that the president filed against himself. There are so many layers to this, it's really hard to unpack it all.
Yeah. I know that was a slip of the tongue, the Trump alley thing, but like that is sort of what this feels like to me, is that it's like someone's going to walk in here who beat a cop over the head with an aluminum bat on January 6th. They're like, yeah, go around back. We got something for you and you could do it again. Is like how this feels, right? Like it feels so corrupt. And from your standpoint of this, as somebody who worked in the Department of Justice, and with the people you work with now at Justice Connection, the people that the Justice Connection is for, there are so many people at the DOJ who've left, who worked for hundreds of hours on these cases for this to happen now. How are you feeling about that? How are they feeling about this? That it has to be such a disheartening moment in a year and a half of just disheartening moments.
Yeah, I mean, for the prosecutors and the agents who worked on January 6 cases, it's been just one devastating blow after another. Certainly on Inauguration Day, when almost all of the rioters were pardoned, that was a huge blow for them. They spent years of their lives pursuing these cases. And to just pardon everybody in one fell swoop, people who tried to overturn our democratic process, is just baffling. And the indignities, the additional offensive steps this president and the department have taken since then, it's just all hard to fathom. And this is just the latest.
Yeah, could we walk through some of those offensive steps since the last time you and I talked? I mean, the last time you and I talked, we talked about the hollowing out of the Department of Justice, specifically the Civil Rights Division, specifically the Election Security Division. But it's gotten worse. It's gotten worse in the wake of Pam Bondi leaving. We'll get to Todd Blanche in a second. But for you in the last, let's say, 6 months, is this new slush fund the most egregious thing, or have there been other things that have just really, caught you off guard?
It's really hard to put
Yeah,
all
yeah,
of
no,
the
I know.
examples of corruption and illegal and unconstitutional acts in any kind of order. But we have seen so many horrific things happen since you and I last talked. We've seen vindictive prosecutions. We've seen, lying in courts. We've seen cases dropped against the president's friends. We've seen, horribly corrupt criminals pardoned because, they're allies of this president. We've seen an acting attorney general who's very clearly auditioning to become the permanent attorney general, ramp things up, even since Pam Bondi, who I think most would agree was the worst attorney general we had ever seen. And, in terms of DOJ's workforce, things just keep getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at this point, well over 10,000 DOJ employees have left, many left involuntarily. Over 3,400 lawyers have left. That has left a deep hole in terms of expertise and institutional knowledge at the department. And, repairing that is going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible.
What does that kind of hollowing out mean? I mean, we are talking about people who have decades of experience in these cases that they have been building sometimes for years, but also just operational knowledge of how the Department of Justice is supposed to operate logistically, but I think more importantly for our conversation, ethically, right? Like it's these people who uphold the importance of this job who just aren't there anymore.
DOJ is nothing without its career workforce. And traditionally, it's been extremely hard to get a job at DOJ because the department demands that only the cream of the crop work there. And the cream of the crop has always wanted to work there. It's always been extremely hard to get in. And people who have been working there, as you said, for years and decades have left. And that has left enormous holes throughout the department. So what that means, practically speaking, is that our civil rights, our nation's civil rights, which are still on the books, are not really being enforced. It means that public corruption is not being addressed. It means that our environmental laws are not being enforced. It means our tax laws are not being enforced as vigorously. White-collar crime is being ignored. Mm-hmm. And, the FBI has been diverted in many cases from its traditional work, preventing terrorism, preventing civil rights abuses, preventing violent crime. The list could go on and on and on. And all of these errors are unforced. And it's going to be really hard to get the department back on course. And certainly, we don't see anyone in the administration or anyone in power in Congress who's willing to start, taking us on that course correction.
Yeah. I mean, I will say it sounds like yesterday there was a pretty tense meeting between Todd Blanche and at least 25 Republicans in the Senate who have not enjoyed this new anti-weaponization fund idea and like how it's operating, which is unusual for them. But I don't think that's going to change anything within the DOJ. I think they're just going to yell at Todd Blanche and he's going to go do whatever he was going to do in the first place, because you said it, like he is the auditioning attorney general more than he's the acting attorney general. So I don't know. There's a thing about replacing these people in the DOJ that I've thought about for a few weeks now, and I can't remember who specifically told it to CNN, but it was in one of their articles that they're having a hard time backfilling all these people that they've fired because they're looking for loyalists. And the problem is that the loyalists and the people who are good at these jobs, that is not necessarily a Venn diagram. It's more like two separate circles. What does that mean for the future of the DOJ? I have trouble reconciling this idea because they're going to pick the loyalists. They're going to pick the people from Liberty University. They're not going to pick the people coming out of, GW Law. So what happens now?
It's tough. We know for a fact that they're having trouble hiring. They're taking desperate, frankly, pathetic measures to get people to apply and take these jobs. They're offering financial incentives, which is just unprecedented. They're lowering hiring standards. Like, for example, prosecutors used to have experience prosecuting cases in other jobs. They eliminated that requirement. So people right out of law school are now able to become DOJ prosecutors. They've lowered hiring requirements in the FBI. They're even, in many cases, offering DOJ lawyers money to stay. They're giving them bonuses to stay. That's absurd. So, and the reason all of these things are happening is because they're just not getting applicants for these jobs. When I was there, for every attorney opening, there would be hundreds or thousands of applicants. Now they're desperately trying to get anyone to apply. DOJ political leaders are making these really humiliating social media videos begging people to apply for these jobs. It's just demeaning to the department's integrity. It's just hard to believe that DOJ can't get lawyers to apply for these jobs. And it makes sense. I mean, every day we see examples of DOJ lawyers who are ordered to take steps that are unethical or illegal or unconstitutional. That's just unheard of. So, people in the public, lawyers in the public know that, and it's making it difficult to get people to apply.
Yeah, I mean, I want to talk about the issue with trust in the DOJ a little later because, specifically there was a judge in a case out of Chicago yesterday who said that the DOJ has violated the trust of good faith in that courtroom, and that had to do with anti-ICE protesters. But I think when we talk about trust in the DOJ, it really does start with Todd Blanche. What's your take right now on his tenure as head of the DOJ? I think Pam Bondi, you said it was the worst AG we've ever seen, but was definitely a much more MAGA aligned, politically aligned attorney general with the president. Todd Blanche feels something else to me, feels more ambitious, feels more in it personally than I think Pam Bondi was in it ideologically. And I honestly cannot tell which is more harmful for the Department of Justice.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to really psychologically analyze these people.
Sure.
But
that might
I
be
don't know
harmful to
exactly
us.
what
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
them tick. But,
Yeah.
one obvious difference is Pam Bondi was nominated and confirmed before she started the job, whereas Todd Blanche is there in an acting position, and we don't know yet who is going to be nominated to fill the permanent position. So it certainly seems like he is doing everything he can to demonstrate that he is willing to show the president complete fealty, probably in an effort to be the one chosen for the job.
Yeah.
His conduct has changed. His willingness to engage in unethical and illegal conduct has escalated. So, if I had to guess, I would say the reason he is acting like this is because he wants that job.
Yeah. As the person who runs the DOJ then, I mean, he sets the tone for this. So if he gets this role, right, officially, I mean, he's got it now. And it seems like the president is going to run with the clock on this as long as he can, because the acting role, I think, has something like 218 days of I think that's right, unless it's 128 and I had a dyslexic moment. But I think it's 218 days of being allowed to run the Department of Justice without needing Senate confirmation, which is an awfully long time. So if he's running the DOJ and setting the ethical tone for this, what are your worries about how this is trickling down through the department?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people there who are working there now know that if they get caught in the crosshairs, meaning if they end up working on a case or being assigned a case that is, important to the president or important to DOJ leadership, they will be told to do whatever leadership and the president wants to have happen. And if they don't, they will probably be cast aside.
Yeah.
Now, I will point out that there are people still at DOJ who are working on cases on matters that are not affected directly by, this administration's agenda, this president's agenda. There are a lot of people still at DOJ doing their work as diligently and as independently as they always have. So I don't want to make it seem like every single career employee at the department is affected by this or in any way is compromising their ethical responsibilities.
Right. Absolutely. There are still people there who are keeping this machine running. Things are on the rails. Pick your metaphor for this.
And I will also say that there are a lot of people there who have gotten caught up in this president's retribution campaign and illegal conduct and have said no, have resigned in protest, have done other things to push back, have made it clear that they are not going to bend their ethics, their responsibilities. And we've seen incredible acts of courage come out of DOJ's career workforce, some of which have gotten publicity, but many others haven't. So, when we kind of disparage what's happening at DOJ, we don't talk about the conduct of career employees. We talk about the conduct of the leadership, which is being ordered around by this president. And so I'm throwing that out there to just kind of maintain that there really is a difference between the career workforce and the leadership that is currently in place.
Why do you think we don't talk about that enough? Because I think that's a really important point that we just, like I said, we just don't talk about that enough. I think partly is because the flashier headlines talk about, Todd Blanche getting into an arguing match in a Senate hearing than it is to talk about some court case happening in Minnesota. But I think that is an important point. So would you rather there be more focus on that right now?
I would much rather there be more focus on that right now. And I think there isn't a focus on that because I think most Americans don't really understand how DOJ works. I think people assume that DOJ is the attorney general and maybe a small group of people who surrounds that person. But in reality, there are roughly, I think, 1,000 or so, maybe fewer than 1,000 political appointees at the Department of Justice, probably fewer. And there are over 100,000 career employees, dedicated civil servants who work across administrations, who work at the department regardless of whether there's a Democrat or a Republican in the White House. And I said earlier that backbone of the department is its career workforce. They're the ones who do the work. They're the ones who litigate the cases. They're the ones who investigate cases. They're the ones who issue grants and do so much at the department that happens every day. And it's easy to lose sight of the fact that the people who are creating chaos there, it's just a small handful of people. Right. But people kind of use those, the actions at the very top as shorthand for the Department of Justice. And that's not really how it works at all.
Today's episode is brought to you by Ground News, which is something that I wish was around when I first started getting interested in and covering politics. I know it seems like common sense now, but it's really hard to sift through all the news that is out there because the same story can be completely different depending on who and where you're reading it from. That's where Ground News comes in. They give you all the versions of the story right in your feed, left, right, and center. They show you those side by side so you can see how the framing changes and you get a full view of the story. They also have a blind spot feed that flags stories that are being ignored by one side of the aisle entirely. In a media landscape built to keep you in an echo chamber, Ground News shows you the way out. And right now you can use the link in the description for 40% off. It is their best deal on their best plan. That's the Vantage plan right now. You can only get it from Make It Make Sense. Get access to their blind spot feed, more than 50,000 unique outlets for news, and one of my favorite features is their Burst Your Bubble newsletter, which helps you break out of that echo chamber and shows you your own media bias for all the things that you consume. I think it is an invaluable resource to expose you to different ideas and help keep your own media diet healthy, because a healthy media diet is just as important as a regular diet. Again, use the exclusive code in the description to get 40% off the Ground News Vantage plan, their absolute best plan right now. I mean, I know that we just said this, but I do want to talk about somebody creating chaos at the top here, which is Kash Patel, and the kind of chaos that that's creating for a lot of career FBI agents right now. Kash Patel seems to be out of the president's direct line of fire in this moment. I think that's sort of fallen by the wayside, given everything else that's been happening. But as far as the DOJ goes, the FBI is maybe the most visible part of it. Having somebody like Kash Patel in that role, how damaging is that to the Department of Justice and as a whole, even if somebody doesn't work for the FBI and has no real dealing with them?
It's hard. It would be hard to overstate how damaging Patel has been to morale at the FBI and the work at the FBI. The FBI's importance in keeping our country safe is just key. I mean, it's the top agency that works on counterintelligence and counterterrorism, public corruption and white collar crime. I mean, the FBI keeps us all safe and secure in ways that almost no Americans understand. Yeah. And at the moment, we have, frankly, a corrupt clown running the place. And, you know, there's been tons of reporting about what has been happening at the very top. And the fact that nothing has been done about it, it blows my mind. It should blow everybody's mind.
Yeah.
I mean, the reporting from The Atlantic, the reporting from the AP just last week about him snorkeling at Pearl Harbor. Yeah. We know what's been happening at the FBI, and Kash Patel can sue reporters all he wants. The FBI can investigate reporters all they want. It doesn't change the fact that the conduct at the top of the FBI is incredibly dangerous to our country's safety and security.
And I think that's an interesting part of this, too, is that in so much talk about Kash Patel, because this stuff is so farcical, because he is such a frat boy clown. And as you know, we're talking about this, it is the video of him at the Olympics, right, that I think everyone saw, and that's the one that's playing in my head here, that just, it makes him seem so ridiculous, but it sort of, I don't know, outdoes the fact that makes us less safe. And that is this part that, yes, gets talked about a little bit. It is in the Atlantic articles that came out, but also it's not in the other things. And is it time that as reporters, journalists like myself, that we start going that far and saying, like, hey, these are actual national security risks? People like Kash Patel, people like Todd Blanche, in the way that they're behaving, aren't just illegal, corrupt, aren't just clownish or buffoonery, but it's actual... it's risking the safety of Americans and our lives. Is it time that we do that? Or is it probably past time we do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of like the palace intrigue about the drinking and the SWAT team showing up at his, house to wake him up. Like, these are all, interesting, appalling stories. But I do think journalists need to go further than that and talk about the actual consequences. What does it mean when you have thousands of FBI agents taken off their beat so that they can enforce immigration laws, which is not their job? What does it mean that, FBI agents are being fired right before this country decides to go to war with Iran? And the agents who were fired were Iran experts. What does it mean that, agents are, instead of working on espionage cases, flying around protecting Kash Patel's girlfriend? All of these things have real consequences. I mean, there's been some good reporting from ProPublica about a lot of the cases that have been closed other cases that haven't been opened. And I think there needs to be more journalism focusing on that, really making it clear what the practical effects on American safety this is really having.
I want to talk a little bit too about how the Department of Justice can win back trust here, because all of this has really started, I shouldn't say started to, all of this has worn away so much trust that I think the Department of Justice had spent a lot of time rebuilding post Hoover, post Watergate, right, post Gray. That took a lot out of the trust and credibility that Americans felt for the FBI, for the Department of Justice. And it took decades to build that back. And I don't think it ever actually fully came back. And now we get this. And it absolutely took out all of that work at the knees. Is there a way that the Department of Justice can rebuild that? I mean, it's not going to happen quickly, probably, but how does that start? Or am I off base in thinking that in the first place?
So I think it needs to start now. If leadership changes in roughly 2 years, and if current leadership is replaced by leadership that actually respects the rule of law, they will need, I think, building blocks for getting us back on track. So I think the work to rebuild, reimagine the department should absolutely start right now. And I think it's really important that, some of the people at the head of the table are former career employees, the people who really understand the department the best, the people who were, the foundation of the department. As I said earlier, the people who worked at the department when Republicans were in charge, when Democrats were in charge, the people who understood what the cracks in the foundation really were, why it was so possible to tear down the department as easily as this administration has. So, when rebuilding planning starts, when rebuilding actually happens, I really hope that former career employees are a major part of that process. And we at Justice Connection are going to do everything we can to make sure that that happens.
I was going to say, where does that start? Who does that start with? Obviously, it's with Justice Connection, but does it start outside? Does it start in an opposition party? Should the Democrats win the House and the Senate, or one of those chambers, or both of those chambers? Does it not have to involve Congress at all? Because I just don't think that it'll start in this administration in any way, shape, or form, given how it operates. So where does that start, and who does that start with? Are there people out there willing to take that risk right now to start openly planning these things?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are going to be a lot of stakeholders out there who are going to want to engage in this process. I think there are going to be a lot of political actors because, realistically, this can only happen if there's political change. But, I think that there are many others who should be involved in this as well. And, I think there are going to be academics involved. I think there are going to be lawyers from, outside DOJ involved. But again, the way it needs to be rebuilt is it's going to need to be truly independent. It's going to need to be truly apolitical. And the people out there who really fit that mold are the people who used to work there in career jobs. So again, I think that they really need to be involved in this process. I think they are willing to I know for a fact that they're willing to take the risk involved in being involved in that process. And Justice Connection is going to be involved in coordinating them, mobilizing them, and helping them prepare proposals and implement them when the time comes. And, I think it also is really going to need to involve Congress because DOJ has traditionally functioned on norms, guidelines and policies, which were written down, but had no real enforcement mechanisms because they weren't backed by law. So Congress, I think, is really going to need to pass laws to make sure that the norms are codified and are actually enforceable, and that if they are broken, for example, if we see a vindictive prosecution in the future, the people involved in that vindictive prosecution should suffer real consequences and not just, violate unwritten guidelines that are internal to the Justice Department. So there's going to be a lot of work required, but I think a lot of people are interested in doing that work.
Before that happens, and this is my last question here, right now, what can the average person do to support the people who are just doing the everyday work in the Department of Justice? Because I think that there's a need for a morale boost within the DOJ, and maybe that needs to come from the broader electorate, from the American people, to say, hey, we see what's at the top here, but we know that you're doing the work on the ground that needs to happen. So how do we tell them that?
It's so hard for career employees who are inside the Justice Department right now, not only because they're being demonized and abused by their leadership, but because they're being judged by a lot of Americans who believe that by staying, they're somehow supporting this administration, which is absolutely not the case. They are making incredible sacrifices to continue doing their jobs to try to uphold the rule of law, and they need support from the outside. DOJ employees are across this country. They're not all in, the Washington, D.C. area. They are in every state and every community. Most Americans know people in DOJ. Anybody who knows people in DOJ should let them know that their service is appreciated, that they are being supported, and they're like ways anybody can offer to support DOJ employees. If they're struggling to maintain, their work and take care of their families, you can offer to babysit, bring over meals, let them know that their work matters. And people can also support organizations that are supporting them. I mean, Justice Connection's sole mission is to support career employees at the Justice Department. We are a small organization, and we are not, supported by big foundations or big money. We function only because people who understand why we're so important are supporting us. So, a shameless plug, but, I encourage you to support our work. And also, I encourage everybody to get on the phone with their senators and their representative and say, do your job. One job Congress has is to exercise its oversight responsibility over the Justice Department. And we're not seeing that. Congress is supposed to be a co-equal branch of government, and they have largely abdicated that role. They need to be stopping what is happening at Justice, and they're not doing it now. And the only way they're going to change is if their constituents demand it. So, I encourage everyone to reach out and lobby their senators and representatives to make sure that the Justice Department has the oversight it needs right now.
Yeah. And nothing shameless about the plug. There's a link to Justice Connection in the description for this episode, so listeners will be able to get that right away. So don't worry about that.
I appreciate that.
Stacey, I really appreciate you coming on and the work you do at Justice Connection and talking to me about all this. I know this has not been an easy, year and a half or whatever for you, but really, I cannot appreciate your time enough for coming on the show. So thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. It was great.
I want to thank Stacey again for coming back on the show. Like I said, you can find a link to Justice Connection in the description for this episode. And that is it for today's episode. Please rate and review the show wherever you get the podcast. Sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack, where paid subscribers get access to this week's original piece of reporting, The Isolation of Donald Trump, about how the president has been doing fewer and fewer public appearances, even though he's been on camera maybe a little bit more. He's not ventured outside the White House all that much, or his own properties for that matter. And we got more of that this weekend because he said he's not going to be attending his own son's wedding. Instead, he's going to be parked in D.C. Paid subscribers also get access to the Make It Make Nonsense essays on Sundays. This week, it is a love letter to the Ringer's movie review podcast, The Big Picture. It is a massive source of just real escape for me every weekend. And if you're a movie lover, you got to check it out. I will write all about it and tell you why. But that is just for paid subscribers to the Substack for $5 a month. As always, share the show on social media. You can tag me at Grant Hermes on Twitter and Blue Sky, and at Grant_Hermes on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Grant Hermes, and I'll talk to you next time.